Hi everybody, how are you? Everything fine? I hope everything is fine with you. This is Fortino Academics. My name is Irmes Ababa. I'm a lecturer of Jijjiga University from Ethiopia. Today I'm gonna be presenting you a tutorial from the course Introduction to Economics, and our major concentration will be from chapter 5, which is market structure. Okay, so what we will be doing today is we will be characterizing four types of market structures that we have in economics, which are perfect competitive market, monopolistically competitive market, and monopoly, and finally oligopoly markets. Okay, so we will be characterizing these markets, and we will see the differences between these four markets and also the similarities. All right, so stay with me, don't go anywhere. If you are new for Fortino Academics, please don't forget to subscribe, because it is the way to be notified while Fortino Academics releases new videos in the future. Okay, all right. I took the notes for this tutorial from the module prepared by Ministry of Science and Higher Education of Ethiopia, which is an harmonized module which is supposed to be given for freshman undergraduate students. So, as an introduction, let me see that this chapter discusses how a particular firm makes a decision to achieve its profit maximization objective. First of all, we have to know that the objective of a given firm, or an objective of any seller, is to get a profit, and that profit must be maximized, is the objective of the sellers. Okay, so if that is the objective of a seller, that seller or the firm must know the playing field that it is going to play on. Okay, for example, if a football team is going to play a game, they have to know the environment of the area that they are going to play. They have to know the structure of the stadium. They have to know the temperature of the city that they are going to play. So they have to know the structure of the playing ground in order to win the game successfully, right? So similar to this football concept, coming to the market situation, a seller wants to maximize its objective, and that objective is profit maximization, right? So in order to maximize profit, the seller must know the playground that he or she is going to play on. All right, okay. So a firm's decision to achieve this goal is dependent on the type of the market in which it operates. Okay, the firm will make a decision of the price, or else the firm will make a decision on the quantity that he or she is going to supply for the market. So in order to make such kinds of decisions, the firm or the seller must know the type of market that the firm is operating in. Okay, so without knowing the playing ground, you cannot play well, that is for sure. Okay, so using that concept, firms make decisions. Why are firms making decisions? The decision is in order to maximize profit, right? So every decision that they have to take is dependent on the type of the market that they are playing in. For example, in order to make a price decision, and also in order to make a decision on a quantity that they are going to sell or they are going to supply, depends on the type of the market. So it is obvious that the firm must know which market or the type of the market that it is operating. Okay, to this effect, we distinguish between four major types of markets. Okay, so whenever you're asked by anybody how many kinds of market structures do you know, then your answer must be 4. Okay, so how many market structures do you know? You know 4. Okay, but the question is, in order to classify markets into 4, what is your base or what is your ground for classification? That is a basic question. For example, if somebody asks you a question, human being is classified into dash, you have to ask, my friend, your question is human being is classified into dash, right? Or blank space. So let me ask you a question. Based on what? Okay, that must be the question that you have to ask for the question. So he or she will tell you, classify human being in terms of gender. Then you will say, yes, human being is classified into 2. What about if the question is in terms of nationality? Oh, it will be Chinese, it will be an Ethiopian, it will be an American, so it will be classified in accordance. So whenever you are facing a question of to classify something, the first question or the first consideration that you have to take is what are the criteria to classify. So in our case here, we are trying to classify markets into different types. So the criteria to classify market into different types is first is the number of buyers and sellers is extremely important. Second, the price determination, okay, mechanism. How is the price of a product is being determined? That is the second question. And also you can ask barrier or freedom of entry and exit to the market is our third criteria. Okay, and also we can take the types of products that we are dealing with is also a sort of a criteria. So how many criteria that I told you? I told you about 4 criteria. For example, the first one is the number of buyers and sellers. That is the first criteria to classify markets. The second criteria is the types of products or the types of goods and services that we are dealing with is the second criteria. And the third criteria is price determination, okay? The price determination mechanism is different from market to market. So price determination is also another criteria to classify markets. And the other one is freedom of entry or exit into the market or out of the market is also our other criteria. So based on such kinds of criteria, markets are classified into 4. And the first one is perfectly competitive market, monopolistically competitive market, oligopolistic market, and finally we have a pure monopoly market. So how many types of markets do you know at this moment? You know there are 4 types of markets. Okay, the first one is perfect competition, the second one is monopolistic competition, the third one is oligopoly market, and the fourth one is a monopoly market. So with this tutorial we will be looking at the detailed differences between these 4 types of market structures. Okay, but first of all let us see the concept of market in physical and digital terms. First of all, what do we mean by saying market? You know, whenever we think of market, most of the time we assume that it is a place where buyers and sellers meet for an exchange of goods and services. Okay, we always say that it is a place. Okay, yeah, it is true, but it is not usually true. Sometimes, even because of technology, this time buyers and sellers will not be expected, or it will not be necessarily to meet physically. So we can say that there is no base to say that it is a place. Just we can say that market is just a medium of exchange, okay? Or it is a sphere in which buyers and sellers are able to exchange goods and services in order to achieve their own objectives. Okay, so simply let me tell you the comprehensive definition of markets in accordance with American Marketing Association. This association defined market as it is a process of, first you have to plan and execute, implementing. Planning and executing what? Planning and executing goods and services and ideas. So planning and executing the conception, in a sense that the first thinking of the idea for goods and services, then those ideas and products are going to be priced. You have to give them the price. You have to value your products, or you have to value the service that you are going to present, or you have to value in terms of money the idea that you have conceived by your mind. Then you have to make a promotion in order to reach your customers. Then after reaching your customers, the last thing to do with your goods and services and ideas is that you have to distribute them to your customers, which means that because of that you are creating exchanges. Exchanges, in a sense, the buyers will pay you money and you will be giving a service or a product back to the buyers. Okay, so this way we say that exchange occurs. Because of these exchanges, individual and organizational objectives are satisfied. Okay, buyers do have their own objectives while buying materials or while buying goods and services, and the seller itself do have an objective while selling its product. So simply it is an exchange where buyers and sellers are doing exchanges in order to satisfy their objectives. Okay, so market describes a place or a digital space. That's the important point. Market can be a place as a market that you know in your local area, or else market will be a digital space like Amazon, for example. Buyers and sellers communicate digitally by using the internet sphere, then communicating with each other, negotiating with each other, and paying the money online, and the products will be delivered to the buyers in accordance with the specification and the payment of money. So we can describe market as a place or a digital space by which goods, services, and ideas are exchanged to satisfy consumers' need. Not only consumers, actually, the buyers' needs, the sellers' needs also. All right, so classifying market into two, we have digital market when we are marketing products or services using digital technologies like the internet, or physical market is a setup where buyers must physically, as you can see, if it is a place, you have to physically meet their sellers and purchase the desired merchandise or the products from the sellers using money. That's simple. So by this moment, I hope that you understand market in a sense that market is just buying and selling activity where buyers and sellers are communicating each other in order to create exchange, and it is categorized into two, which is digital marketing and physical marketing. The basic difference between these two is here in physical marketing, buyers and sellers must meet physically in order to conduct the exchange, but in digital marketing you can use only a digital technologies like the internet in order to purchase materials. That is the basic difference between these two markets. So now let's just begin characterizing and differentiating between the four types of market structures that we have seen earlier. Okay, so at this moment, let me ask you one question. How many kinds of market structures do you know? You should be answering saying 4. And what are those types of market structures? You have to say first we have perfect competitive market, monopolistic competitive market, monopoly market, and the oligopoly market. These are the 4 market structures that you have to know at this moment. Now let me characterize what perfect competitive market is. Okay, whenever I say characterization, it means that what should be the image that comes to your mind when you hear the word perfectly competitive market? What shall be the image? Okay, the characteristics that shall be or that should be coming into your mind is what we have to understand about characteristics. So first of all, perfect competitive market is a structure where there is a complete absence of rivalry among individual firms. Okay, sellers of such kinds of markets are not competing with each other. In a sense, they are competing with each other, but there is no rivalry. Okay, there is no something we can describe as a fight, or something that we can say there is no a sense of being an enemy. Okay, there is no a sense of war, there is no a sense of fight. That is the point that you have to understand. It doesn't mean that they are not in competition. They are in competition because they are selling materials, but it is not a rivalry. Okay, it is not a fight. Anyways, here we go. The characteristics of perfect competitive market. The first one is there are large number of sellers and buyers. We have a plenty of buyers as well as plenty of sellers. Very good. The second is homogeneous characteristics of the products, which means that this large number of sellers are selling identical or homogeneous products. When we say homogeneous, it doesn't mean similar. It means exactly the same. For example, milk sellers. A milk from the first shop and a milk from the second shop and also from the third shop is the same. Okay, so whenever we say homogeneity while talking about the product, you have to remember it is not similarity, it is exactly being the same. Copy and paste. Okay, so in perfectly competitive market, we have large number of sellers selling identical products. Okay, the same products, no difference at all. No difference at all. The products are identical from seller to seller. That is the important point. The other characteristics of a perfectly competitive market is perfect mobility of factors of production. What do we mean by saying factors of production? It means that the inputs that we are using for production. Okay, what do we mean by saying mobility? Mobility is movement from one producer to another producer. For example, here, labor is free to move from one seller to another seller. Okay, there is no barrier for factors of production to move from one seller or one producer to another producer. So simply, factors of production are free to move from a seller to another seller. So we can say that there is a perfect mobility of factors of production. The fourth one is there is a freedom of entry and exit. When we say freedom of entry and exit, it doesn't mean you are free to physically enter the market and you are free to physically exit the market. It doesn't mean like that. When we say free entry and exit, if you want to open a business in a perfect competitive market, you are free to open that business, or else it is easy to open the business. And by any time you want, if you decided if you decide to leave the market by closing your business, it is extremely easy, which means that there is a freedom of exit from the market. Okay, so perfectly competitive market is characterized as a free entry and exit kind of market. Okay. The fifth one is there is a perfect knowledge about the market conditions. Okay, when we say perfect knowledge, it doesn't mean that the buyers and sellers should have PhD or masters, but we are saying that the buyers of a given product do have a full information about the product. For example, and most importantly, about the price of the product, the quality of the product. So everything about the product is known by the seller as well as by the buyers. Okay, so no one is subjected to be played by blindly, because they know perfectly what the characteristics or what the market condition looks like. By the way, perfect competitive markets is unlikely in a real world, or it doesn't exist in a real world. Okay, let me repeat it. Perfectly competitive market is not present in the real world. So you may ask, why are we learning it? Why are we learning it? It is because of the fact that perfect competitive market is an ideal one. Okay, it is an ideal one. Ideal in a sense that the best one that every economist shall try to approximate to the perfect competitive market. So you have to observe the ground market, you have to see the characteristics of that market, and you have to try to transform the current market in order to approach perfect competitive market model, because this is an ideal one, this is the best one. So if you are an economist, you have to try to make the current market structures to approach to perfect competitive market. For example, by disseminating information about the products, the qualities, the price, using television, radio, something like that, you can transform the current market that you are dealing with to approach, not to become perfectly competitive, at least to approach. All right, that's the point. So let us continue. From this assumption, a single producer under perfectly competitive market is a price taker. What do we mean by that? First of all, what is to mean, or what do we mean by saying price taker? So at this moment, let me differentiate between two words, price taker and price maker. If you are price taker, it means that somebody or some organization or some entity is determining the price of the product, and you are just taking that price. You are not determining that price, but you are accepting the price as it is. So you are a price taker. But if you are price maker, it means that you have the power to decide the price of your product. But in this case, our sellers are price takers, as well as the buyers. By the way, buyers are also here price takers. So who determines the price? Who determines the price is the question. So in order to answer that question, we will be looking at a graph next to this a little bit discussion. Okay, that is, at the market price, the firm can supply whatever quantity it would like to sell. Okay, so once the price of the market is determined, you can choose whatever the quantity that you are willing to sell. Everything will be sold in a market without affecting the price. Once the price is decided, then you don't have the power on it, but you can supply whatever quantity you want, and you will still get the same price. Okay, so by the way, all things that you supply will also be sold. Okay, everything that you supply to the market will be sold. All right. Okay, once the price of the product is determined in a market, the producer takes the price, yes, as it is. Hence, the demand curve that the firm faces in the market in this situation is a horizontal line drawn at the equilibrium price of the market. So DF means, we say, demand curve of the firm, which is the individual firm, and PM is a price of the market, and I will discuss it using the following graph. So what we're about to discuss, or we're about to do, is first of all we will see how the market price or the market equilibrium is met by the intersection of the demand and the supply curves of the market. Okay, first of all we will see how the price mechanism works in the market. Then we will see how the individual sellers or the individual firms accept the already decided price that they will be using to construct their own demand curve. Okay, this is what we are about to discuss. So let us begin the discussion by from the market. So in a market, you know that there are many sellers and many buyers, and from these many buyers we have the market demand. Okay, from this all many buyers we have the downward sloping demand curve. So in the market we can say that when a given price of when a price of a given product increases, we can say that the quantity demanded decreases. Okay, when a price of a given product decreases, we know from chapter 2 that quantity demanded will increase. So the relationship between price and quantity, as you may remember from chapter 2, is negative, and the demand curve is downward sloping. Okay, then there are a number of sellers, and totally the sellers will be having the following supply curve. This is a supply curve of the market. So whenever a price of a given product increases, quantity supplied will increase while discussing supply. Okay, the relationship between quantity supplied and a price is positive or direct, which means that when a price increases, the quantity supplied will increase. So if you want, for example, as a seller, if you want to increase price, what you have to do is increasing the supply. Whenever you increase the supply, it means that you are increasing the price. Whenever you are decreasing the quantity supplied, it means that you are decreasing the price. Anyways, now the supply and demand of the market intersect each other at this point, and this point is known as an equilibrium. This is the market equilibrium. In this market equilibrium, we can get the market price, which is determined by the market supply and demand curves. Okay, so this is the equilibrium price of the market. Okay, so we're about to see the demand curve of firms. Summing the whole firms together, we get the market. Now we are about to see the individual demand curve after the price, which is the equilibrium price, is determined by the intersection of supply and demand curves of the market. Now this is the price, which means that every seller in the market must accept this price. So now, do you get the answer for the question which said, who determines the price? So in a perfectly competitive market, the market demand and the market supply will determine the price. Then after this price is determined, the individual firms will accept it as it is, which means that we have this price for every individual firms, or for every sellers, and even for every buyers. We will be having this price to accept. Who determines this price? The market determines the price. Then after the determination of the price,
the sellers will have this price. Now the buyers are expected to have the same kind of price. You know that the demand curve of an individual, or here as you can see, this is the demand curve of the market, which is downward sloping. So whenever we increase quantity, the price must be here. So the buyers do have many price opportunities over here. A price over here, a price over here, a price over here, a price over here. As you can see, whenever price decreases, quantity demanded will decrease. So there will be a price movement, right? But here, once the price is determined, for example, let's say the seller supplies at this point. When the seller supplies at this point, then the price is at this point. Then we say that this is the first quantity being sold, or else we can say that this is the first quantity that the buyers are demanding. Okay, let's say in quantity 2, still the price is the same, but the quantity is here. When the seller wants to increase the quantity into here, the price is constant. When the seller wants to sell at QE4, still the price is at here. When the seller wants to sell at this point, then we get the same price. As you know that while connecting, or simply we can say this firm faces a demand curve from the buyers, right? For example, here sellers or suppliers are facing a demand curve which they must be playing with from the buyers. So similarly, this firm is faced with a demand curve from the buyers, which looks like this one. It will be a new idea for you to discuss on behalf of the firm in talking about a demand. It is new, right? Most of the time, or previously we were saying that when we say firm, we were talking about the supply. So this is the demand curve that the firm is facing, okay? So this is a way that you have to understand, okay? It doesn't mean that it is a demand, the firm is a demander. It doesn't mean that the firm is a buyer. But what we are trying to explain here is that every individual firm or any individual seller is facing this demand curve from the buyers in which it can operate on, okay? So this is a demand curve actually from the buyers which faces individual firms. So this is the playground in which this firm can make different decisions in order to maximize its profits, okay? This is the structure of the market that it faces. Whatever quantity the seller provides, it will get, or he or she will be getting the price which is the same. At any quantity, whatever the amount of the product that the seller is willing to supply to the market, it is being sold. It is being sold. Nothing will be left. So everything that is provided by the firm, if it is sold, do you think that there will be any competition? For example, a price competition, reducing the price will attract customers, of course. But at PE, whatever the quantity the seller is providing, if it is sold totally, what is the need to decrease the price? There is no need, because everything that you provide to the market by this price will be sold out. Okay. Do you think that there will be non-price competitions like advertisement over here? If everything provided to the market by the firm is being sold, do you think that there is a need for an advertisement or non-price competition? No. So that's why we say there is no rivalry among the sellers. All sellers are facing the same demand curve, which is horizontal. By nature, you know that demand curve is downward sloping. For example, if at this market, if we consider this one as an individual market, if a seller is facing this demand curve, in order to increase price, the seller is expected to decrease quantity supplied and will get a higher price. Okay, in order to sell more, for example, at this point, the seller is facing this price. So it is a huge thing to discuss or to think about while doing a decision. But because of the scenario given here, the demand curve that the seller is facing is an horizontal line, which means that whatever quantity that you are producing or whatever quantity that you are willing to sell will be getting the same price level, no change in price. So it means that there is no necessity for a price competition as well as non-price competitions, because everything that is being sold or whatever the decision this individual firm make, underline this concept, please. Whatever the decision of quantity that this firm decides to supply will not affect the market demand, will not affect the price. Okay, whatever the quantity decision that the individual firm is making, it will not affect the market price. Okay? All right. Now, let's continue. You may say that, let's say, this firm produces or wants to sell Q1. Let's say Q1 is 10 and the price is 2, as an example, of course. So if the price is 2 and if the seller is wanting to sell 10, how much revenue do you think that the firm is going to get? Revenue, in a sense, income from selling the products. So here we have 10 times the price to 20 birr will be received. If this is 20 times 2 will be 40, which is revenue. So for each sale, the seller is getting a revenue which is equal to the price. For example, if the seller sells 1, it gets PE. If the seller sells 2, it gets 2 PE. If the seller sells 3 units of output, and the seller will get 3 PE. So PE is a marginal revenue. We can say that marginal revenue, in a sense, additional revenue because of additional single unit of sale. Whenever the seller sells 1 unit, from that unit, the amount of revenue that the seller will get is marginal revenue and is equal to the price. So in perfect competitive market, we will be looking at by part 2 tutorial of this video or this concept, that PE is similar to marginal revenue from each sale. Even average revenue from all sales is equal to price of the market. Anyways, for the time being, it will be enough for you to understand the market's demand and supply curves in perfect competitive market, and how the price is determined, and how this price is received by each firms or by each sellers, and the kind of demand curve that each firms are facing. And it is a horizontal line, And also you have to understand that whatever the quantity that you are choosing, that the seller is choosing to supply, it will not affect the price. That's also another concept. Then keeping this in mind, you can add additional concepts which will not affect or which shall not be affecting your understanding of this discussion, because they are going to be presented by future tutorials. Here, revenue is calculated by P times Q, you know that. And for each additional sale, we have marginal revenue, and marginal revenue is equal to price in perfect competitive market. And we have also seen that average revenue, which will be getting total, which we will be getting from total revenue divided by Q, is also similar to the price. Okay. So let us continue. Okay, now let's discuss the other kind of, or the other type of market structure, which is monopoly market. As the word indicates itself, the word itself indicates you that it is mono in a sense that single or one, right? So as you may expect, that pure monopoly exists when there is a single firm or a single seller. Okay, there is also only one producer of a given product, and there are no close substitutes. Okay, you can get that product only from that seller. You cannot get that product from other sellers. So in pure monopoly or in a monopoly market, the seller that we're dealing with is going to be only one. But you may remember that from the perfect competition market, we have many sellers, right? But at this point, in this market structure, we have a single seller. Let me give you an example or examples of monopoly markets. Let's say electricity provision service. Most of the time, electricity is being provided by one seller in most countries. For example, in Ethiopia, electricity is provided by one seller, which is Ethiopian Electric Power, right? We call it ELPA. Is there any seller of electricity in Ethiopia other than the government? No. So it means that there is only one seller. Another example, maybe in most countries, airline provision services are being provided by a single seller. For example, in Ethiopia, airline service is being provided by Ethiopian Airlines only, right? Which means that there is one seller. You, as a buyer, will choose to go anywhere, but the price is determined by the seller. So we have one seller. In Ethiopia, additional example of monopoly is telecommunication service. For telecommunication service in Ethiopia, there is only one seller, and which is Ethio Telecom, which is government owned, right? So that is also a kind of, or an example of a monopoly market. All right. Now let us see the characteristics of monopoly markets in detail. The first characteristic of the monopoly market is that we have only one seller, a single seller of no close substitute product, which means that the seller here is one and is selling unique in a sense that you cannot find that product from other sellers. That seller is the only seller or the only producer of that product. So we can say that there is no close substitutes. If you want to compare it with a perfect competitive market, in perfect competitive market, everybody is selling the same product, which means that you can find that product from all sellers, right? But in this case, we have only one seller selling unique, you have to underline this word, unique product, okay? The product that this seller is providing has no close substitutes. All right. And the third one is the monopoly, the seller is a price maker, and the buyers here are price takers. Remember, monopoly, type of market structure is a single seller where the seller itself, not the market, the seller itself decides the price and the buyers accepted it as it is. Okay, so who is price taker or who is determining the price in here? We can say the monopoly, which means the single seller itself is determining the price. Okay, so the monopoly will be playing game by determining different levels of price in order to get different quantities of sales, okay, using its own demand curve that it is facing. You know, the seller's individual seller in perfect competitive market faced a horizontal demand curve from the consumers, right? But in this case, the monopoly will face a downward sloping demand curve, which is the obvious curve that you know. So the monopoly has a chance of manipulating the quantities in order to get different levels of price. Or the monopoly has a chance to manipulate the price in order to get different amount of quantities, okay? The monopoly can raise price in order to lower sales, and the monopoly can lower price in order to increase the quantity that is going to be sold. But in perfect competitive market, an individual seller do not have the power to determine or to change the price. Whatever quantity they provide to the market, the price is constant. But in this case, price will be variable in a variation of the quantity demand, the quantity supplied by the monopoly. So the most important thing here to think about it is the monopoly is a price maker. And you may remember from the perfect competitive market that there is a freedom of entry and exit into the market, right? But in this case, there are barriers to entry and exit the market, which means that there is blocked entry. If you want to open a business in a monopoly market, you have to be extremely rich, or you have to have extremely higher wealth in order to compete with the monopoly. For example, if you want to open an airline business in Ethiopia, you have to have the power to compete with Ethiopian Airlines, which is extremely difficult. So it means that opening a business will be, and it is, extremely difficult, and it is blocked entry. By the way, exit itself is difficult in monopoly market, because whenever you want to decide, or whenever you decide to leave the market, you have to sell those huge capitals to other investors, and which is extremely difficult, by the way. So, for example, selling Ethiopian Airline will be extremely difficult compared to selling a simple shop. So that's why entry is blocked, as well as exit is also difficult, and which means that there is a barrier for entry as well as an exit. Okay, these are the characteristics of a monopoly market. I mean, not all characteristics, but some major characteristics of a monopoly market provided in a module. Now let us discuss the sources of monopoly, which means that what are the causes for monopoly to exist, or what are the reasons for some individual, or for an individual, or for a single company, or for a single organization to become a monopoly on some products. The question is, what are the sources which will make a single person, or a single company, or a single organization to become monopoly of one product, which means the sources of monopoly. The first source of monopoly will be legal restriction. Legally, production and selling of that product will be sometimes given for a single entity by law. So anybody who having the power to open that business, let's say that you have the power or you have the money to open that business, but unfortunately it is legally restricted. For example, in Ethiopia, you may have the money to open a telecommunication service, but legally telecommunication service provision is given to the government. No private investors can open a telecommunication provision service at all, which means that telecommunication or Ethio Telecom became monopoly because of the law, legal restriction. Okay. The second source of monopoly is control over key raw materials. Let's say that one investor will have a machinery which that producer invented itself, so that raw material is not present with other sellers, then that producer will become monopoly of the product because it has a unique machineries or raw materials belonging to him or to her. You see, we can raise this issue at a national level. For example, countries, any given country will become a monopoly of something because of nature or natural endowment. For example, Saudi Arabia can become a monopoly of oil because it is naturally given, right? Some areas will be monopoly of diamonds because they are naturally endowed with the diamond. Some areas will become monopoly of gold because of the fact that they are naturally given or naturally endowed by the gold raw materials. Okay, so similar to these countries, individuals sometimes may have raw materials, and these raw materials will not be present, or other sellers may not have them or may not have such raw materials. So the seller or the producer who possesses these raw materials will become monopoly of the product. Okay, this is also another source of monopoly. And the third one is efficiency. You can think of efficiency as, let's say that many sellers opened the same business or opened the same business. Then finally, who will be the champion is the question. Consider as an example 42-kilometer distance of running in Olympics, which is called marathon. In marathon running, as you may know, there will be many runners, many athletes who will begin the competition, right? But finally, because of the efficiency of one person, and again efficiency of that person, finally one person will be the winner. What is the reason behind for this? That athlete is efficient and become number one. Let's say a group of individuals opened similar businesses, and time to time, among those individuals, a single individual, let's say individual A, is more efficient while producing an output. Efficient in a sense, he was able to get the maximum possible output or profit by the given amount of inputs. That's efficiency. So after 2 years, after 4 years, after 6 years, that efficient firm will become strong, and finally it will become a monopoly of that product. Okay, now let us continue to the other source of monopoly, which is a patent right. Sometimes, let's discuss it using an art. Let's say musical art. Any musician will release a music, right? Do you think that other musicians do have the right to copy his work and get money for it? No, because of copyright, right? So whenever somebody invents something or creates new things, it will be registered in its name, in his name or in her name, which means that you are getting, or she's getting, or he is getting a patent right of that product. So nobody, without the permission of the patent right holder, can produce and sell that product, which means that because of patent right, that person or that individual became monopoly of that product. Okay, so these four are among the sources of monopoly. Sources of monopoly are much in number, but these are the most important sources of monopoly. Okay, now let us see the other kind or type of market structure, which is a monopolistically competitive market. Okay, as you can see here, it contains two words that you are familiar with because of the previous discussions. Here we have mono, you remember it from the monopoly. Here we have competitive, you remember it from the perfect competitive market. So the word or the name itself indicates you that monopolistically competitive market is the child of perfect competitive market and monopoly market. Okay, it is between these two. Anyways, this market model can be defined as the market organization in which there are relatively in a sense, compared to the monopoly, there are many firms, but they are not selling the same products here. They are differentiated products, okay? And also, this monopolistically competitive market is a balance, a blend between perfect competition and monopoly market. Remember that. Now let us see the characteristics of monopolistic market in detail. By the way, an example of a monopolistic market can be restaurants, okay? Restaurants will be in the same business, but they are selling differentiated products, different foods. They are not exactly the same. They are differentiated. Differentiated in a sense, they are similar, but not the same. All right? Because of that fact, a given seller of a given food, for example, will become monopoly. Okay, that's why we say monopolistical. Monopoly of that product, because it is slightly different from other products being sold by other sellers, which are many in the market. Okay, anyways, we will discuss it detail right now. Here we have differentiated products. Differentiated products in a sense that they are similar but not exactly the same. As I told you, restaurants are selling food, right? And these food materials are not the same, but they are similar. Copying this idea into Ethiopian case, let's say that a food item, which is let's say በየአይነት, and this በየአይነት will be different from restaurant to restaurant because of the type of food or the element of type of food included in that product. So we can say that Even, for example, we can discuss about macchiato. Macchiato being sold in different groceries are different, but they are similar actually, which means that that seller of that slightly different macchiato will become a little bit monopoly of that product, which means that he or she is able to make a decision on the price, opposite to the perfect competition. In perfect competition, every product, the products of all sellers are the same. So there is no monopolical power in order to control price. But coming to the monopolistically competitive market, a single seller is selling a differentiated product because it is differentiated in a sense, slightly different, not exactly the same. Because of that fact, he or she will possess some degree of monopoly on their products and services. Because of that fact, they are able to manipulate their price and the quantities, which means that they are facing downward sloping demand curve. Remember, in perfect competition market, single sellers were subjected to a horizontal line demand curve. In monopoly, we say that the monopoly is facing a downward sloping demand curve from the consumers. Coming to the monopolistically competitive market, these many sellers are facing, individual seller is facing a downward sloping demand curve from the consumer, which means that the seller can manipulate the price and the quantities. All right? Okay. Differentiated goods, and similar to the perfect competition, there are relatively many sellers and buyers of these differentiated products. Easy entry and exit, similar to the perfect competitive market. Opening a business is easy, and exiting this market is extremely easy, no problem. And there is an existence of non-price competition because they have to attract customers, because they have a slightly differentiated products. They have to tell to the customers what makes their products special. By making customers or buyers believe that your product is special, you have to attract them, which means you have to make an advertisement, which means you have to be engaging in non-price competition. Here we have a price competition as well, but non-price competition is also possible. Non-price competition, for example, an advertisement. Why? What is the reason behind? Because of the fact that you are selling similar but not exactly the same, which are differentiated products. So you have to tell to buyers that your product is different and special compared to the others. So yes, there is an existence of a non-price competition. Very good. So these are among the number of characteristics of monopolistically competitive market. Here we have seen some most important characteristics of monopolistically competitive market. Now let us see the last but not the least type of market structure, which is oligopoly. Oligopoly market structure is where the market is characterized by few dominant firms. In perfect competitive market, we have seen that we have many sellers. In monopoly market, we have seen one seller. In monopolistically competitive market, we have seen many sellers. But in oligopoly market, we have few which are dominant. even if they came together, they can be monopoly of something. Few dominant firms in the market. One example of such kinds of markets or oligopoly markets is gasoline. Okay, oil market, for example, Total, NOC, Shell, kinds of oil sellers are an example of oligopoly market. Another example of oligopoly market is that the automobile market, Nissan, Toyota, something, okay, like that, is also the kind or is also an example of oligopoly market. Anyways, in an oligopoly market, we have few which are dominant firms. Okay. The second characteristics is entry, similar to that of the monopoly market. Entry is blocked because of the power of these dominant firms. It will be difficult to enter and compete with these oligopoly firms. So entry is difficult here. And products may be homogeneous, the same. In a sense, in oil market, for example, in gasoline market, we will see naphtha is exactly the same from seller to the sellers, right? Which means that the gas being sold or the oil being sold by Total and Mobil and Shell are the same, no differences. So sometimes products may be homogeneous, or else like that of the automobile market, they will be differentiated. Okay, so if the product is homogeneous, we say pure oligopoly. If the product is differentiated, it will be a differentiated oligopoly. Okay, so whenever you are asked to differentiate between pure oligopoly and differentiated oligopoly, the main difference is the type of products being involved. Okay, so a special type of oligopoly in which there are only two firms in a market is known as duopoly. So what is duopoly? Duopoly is a kind of oligopoly where the market is dominated by only two, not few, two firms. Okay, all right. So now let us summarize the four types of market structures using these characteristics. Okay, so how many marketing model or market structures do we have? We have four market structures. The first one is perfect competitive, the second one is monopolistic competition, oligopoly, and monopoly. The first criteria that we have used to classify this market is number of firms. In perfect competitive market, as we have discussed, we have large, you can say many, and similar to this one. So monopolistic competition, compared to the perfect competitive, we have lower number but relatively many compared to this and this. In oligopoly, we have few number of firms or number of sellers. In pure monopoly, we have only one number of sellers. The types of products being sold in perfect competitive market, homogeneous, which is to mean identical and exactly the same. In monopolistic competition, we have differentiated, which means that similar but not exactly the same. In oligopoly, it can be homogeneous or differentiated. In pure monopoly, it is unique, special. You cannot find the product of the monopoly from any other seller. Okay, control over price. So when we look at the control over price in perfect competitive market, nobody had the right to control the price, none. In monopolistic competitive market, because of some degree of monopoly power of the firms, because they are selling differentiated products, there is some level of control over the price. Okay, coming to the oligopoly, it is limited by the mutual interdependence, and which is, yeah, they do control the price because they are mutually interdependent with each other. Coming to the pure monopoly, extremely significant control over price is exercised. Coming to the condition of entry and exit, here we have very easy, here we have relatively easy, and in oligopoly there is considerable barriers, and in pure monopoly totally blocked. Okay, example here we can find agricultural products like the milk, like potato, like tomato market, and we have perfectly competitive market for them. In monopolistic we have clothes, shoes, supermarkets, and similar to that. And in oligopoly we have steel, automobile industries, and the oil business. And finally, in pure monopoly we can have an example of local utilities like electricity, water supply, and telecommunication services as an example. Okay, so this is a simple example, simple summary of the whole discussion that we have been having throughout our tutorial. So these are the four types of market structures being characterized by these characteristics. Okay, all right.
Okay, this is the end of today's tutorial. I hope you liked it. If you liked it, don't forget to click the like here, and also don't forget to comment and share the video. Okay, if you have any question, you can comment it here, or else you can communicate me with my official Facebook page address, which is at Fortino Academics, and also using Gmail or email address of mine, which is ermeermias@gmail.com. Okay, so until we meet again by other tutorial, stay safe. Bye bye.